guilt, but we don't care. Brooklyn rooftops, skyline stare. Dreams wrapped in duffel bags, truths are there. Bodega buzz, whispers in the deli. Cops circle slow, tension in my belly. Keys in the ignition, engine hum steady. Heart cold steel, my palms stay sweaty. From Brooklyn to Tel Aviv, cash in the breeze. Chasing dreams, dirty hands, no reprieve. Paper cut sting, blood on the sleeve. Money talks loud, what do you believe?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for checking out American Made. Today, I'm excited to welcome a guest to the channel that has an incredible story. We'll discuss his journey from the Soviet Union to Brooklyn, New York, and then to Israel as a prolific bank robber. During his time in prison, he wrote his book titled Once Upon a Time in Tel Aviv, a bank robber's story, and I'm glad to have him here to discuss it. My guest is Mike Mazursky. Mike, how you doing, man?
How's it going, Justin? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, brother.
Yes, sir. I'm glad you're here. Glad we were able to get together. Like I said, you have an incredible story. But to start with, can you just kind of address, the situation with, hiding your identity and your voice and that sort of thing? That way people kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah, so ever since I got out of prison in Israel, I'm living in another country now, changed my life around, and where I live now, I got a clean record. Nobody knows about my past. I got a clean, legit job. Everything's on the up and up, and I got a second chance at life. So I'm just trying to be careful with not exposing my past. So I worked hard on this book when I was away, and I want people to read it. I want to promote it, but I gotta be careful because I got a second chance at life, and I don't want to mess it up. So,
Right, gotcha. Well, man, let's start at the beginning. Where are you from, and what kind of childhood did you have?
I was born in the former Soviet Union. It was actually still the Soviet Union when I was born, and we moved to Brooklyn when I was a little kid. And I was always I come from a good family, hardworking, educated, and I was always kind of the black sheep. I was always getting into trouble, mischievous, looking for adventure. I was always just different from everybody else in my family in that way. And eventually, kind of one thing leads to another, and it leads you to an Israeli prison cell. But that's further on down the line. So.
Gotcha.
But yeah, born in the former Soviet Union, born in the Soviet Union, it fell apart, and then for a few years it was the former Soviet Union, and then we moved to Brooklyn.
So growing up, you touched on it a second ago, but what kind of things were you getting into that led you down that path to becoming a bank robber? I mean, were you getting into trouble and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so just growing up, always into some petty mischief in the neighborhood. I was never the toughest kid around, but I was always into just petty mischief, wild haired kid, running around looking for trouble. And as I got older, just we were kids. We used to do graffiti, climb up on rooftops, petty stuff. And then, as I got older, I'm not gonna do that nonsense anymore. And you look for the next adrenaline rush. So I was always growing up. I was fascinated with bank robbers. Going to the Dillinger era, to the Stopwatch Gang, if you ever heard of them.
Mm-hmm.
Other bank robbers as well. Just guys that don't hurt innocent people. That they kind of live outside the law. They live by their own rules. And I was always fascinated by that. I was always enamored by that. And then one day when I was late teens, almost early 20s, something like that, I just said, you know what? Actually, it was late teens. Yeah, I just said, you know what? I'm gonna do it, and I just started scheming, plotting, and eventually I got it done. So,
Right. Now in the book, you talk about, you're a kid, you're about 3 years old. You tell a story about your father getting approached by a drunk guy, and then you had this reaction. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so this was back in Russia. It was me, my dad, my grandmother. We were pulling up by our building, and my dad got out of the car to help me out of the back seat. I was like 3 years old. It's probably my earliest memory, one of my earliest memories. And some guy who was plastered out of his mind just tried to get in the front seat of the car. As my dad got out to help me out, this guy just tried to get in the front seat, or he got in the front seat. You know, he probably thought it was his car. He was out of his mind drunk. And my dad kind of grabbed him, like pulled him out of the car. And the guy kept trying to get in the car. So my dad was like shoving him away. And I just ran out of the back seat. I had this little toy yellow gun that I used to carry around. So I ran out of the back seat onto the sidewalk, and I pointed the gun at the drunk, and I started making like pow pow noises. Until my mother, stuck her head out the window and started screaming for my grandmother to get me in the building and bring me up to the apartment. So that's just a memory that stands out. I guess I was even at that age, I was kind of drawn to action, whereas maybe somebody else would have kind of got scared. I don't remember being scared. I remember kind of uh, getting a rush out of it, having fun with it. So
Right.
yeah, it's a memory that sticks out.
Right. Now, you talked about moving to Brooklyn. Brooklyn was always known, as a mafia stronghold, as well as some Russian organized crime. You talked about Dillinger and that sort of thing. Did these guys have any type of influence on you?
Uh, no, not really. So we moved to Brooklyn, we lived in Bensonhurst, which is infamous. It's a mob neighborhood. But when we moved there, it was the '90s, so things were changing. The Italians were kind of leaving and getting pushed out by new immigrants, such as the Russians. And I didn't really see that too much growing up. Um, Later on, as I got older, found out about certain. There were still some mob guys left in the neighborhood, and I found out, oh, this guy runs this business, and I kind of heard about some people doing some things, but never really was around that growing up. And then as far as the Russian organized crime thing, I didn't see that in New York at all. I saw that later in Israel when I was locked up, but I never saw that in New York at all. So not to say it doesn't exist, but I never saw it. Or I never ran across it whatsoever.
Gotcha. Now, the book starts off talking about your first robbery that you carried out in the U.S. Can you talk about, the planning for that and how that went down?
Yeah, so I always like to preface with this that for any would-be crime fighters, the statute of limitations expired a million years ago, so you're out of luck. But basically, uh, at first, like I said, I was a kid. I was like, when I first decided to do this, I was probably like 18. I didn't do it when I was 18, but that's when I first started like having this thought in my mind. So uh, first, I was thinking drill through the ceiling with an acetyl line torch, have a stolen getaway car, or do a takeover, like, rush in the morning, take over, get them to open the vault, movie shit. And when I realized that, doesn't match up with my current skill set, I decided to just, keep it simple. Walk in, ask for the money, walk out. So uh, that's what it ended up being, when I did it.
Gotcha. Now, after this first successful score, I mean, what were you feeling after this?
So as I was driving off, I was whooping and hollering like an Indian war chief. That's a quote from the book too, but might as well use it. It's a good quote. So I was, I had the adrenaline rush and all that, but it wore off pretty quick. And I thought this would be the biggest adrenaline rush of my life because I was always an adrenaline junkie. I was always chasing that. Like I never did drugs in my life. Never tried drugs. I was always an adrenaline junkie, and it's how I got my rocks off, honestly. So I thought this would be just the epitome of it. But for some reason, the first one was a little bit like I got the buzz, but then it wore off real quick, and it was a little anticlimactic. Another thing about it is that I was planning on doing it like earlier than I did it, and the night before like I couldn't sleep at all. I was so nervous. But then the first morning I was supposed to do it, if you can follow this, the first morning I was supposed to do it, something, I don't remember what, but something happened, like logistically, I couldn't pull it off. And then I had to postpone it for weeks, months, I don't remember. But when I ended up actually doing it the night before, I slept like a baby. It's almost like I got all that nervous energy out of me. And I was just, I slept like a baby, did it, got the buzz, wore off quick, and then, I was just kind of like, well, nothing really changed. So, uh, a funny thing with that one is that I ended up. So this didn't make the cut. This wasn't in the book. This story, but I was paranoid that I may have left some prints on the counter because I either had some of my fingers taped up with like not duct tape, but with like tape. Maybe not all of them, something like that. And I was a little paranoid that what if I accidentally left the print, and because I wasn't using the disguise that I used in my later jobs. It's my first one, so everything was very, low level. We could call it that. So I ended up going to a payphone. Back then, we still had payphones. Going to a payphone on the other side of New York City, far away from where I lived. Calling. So this bank job was done in a small town outside the city. So I ended up from doing. I did a little homework. I found out who was the detective that arrived on the scene, et cetera, et cetera. Went to a payphone. I called up the precinct. I asked for the detective by name. I told them I was a detective from the NYPD. They put him on, and I told them that we had a similar, bank job, which that didn't have, obviously. This was the only bank job I'd done at the time, but I said we had a similar bank job, similar MO, and wanted to, see if he had anything off his guy, prints, anything, license plate, whatever. And he bought it hook, line, and sinker. Told me they didn't get nothing. Told me that one of the bank employees ran out to try to see the plates, and a woman did run out. So he was truthful about that. A woman did run out, but had stolen plates anyway on the getaway car. So even if she saw them, it wouldn't matter. But the detective told me she didn't, get to see anything anyway. So I knew he was. By that, I could gauge that he was telling the truth when he told me that there were no prints, nothing, and he had no leads. So I told him, all right, we'll have to wait for the guy to do it again. Hopefully, he messes up. He wished me the best of luck. I wished him the same, and that's it. I hung up the phone, and I knew that I got away clean. So I was kind of. It was my first job, so I was slick. I got away, but I also, didn't tape up all my fingerprints, and I also didn't even bring a bag, so I had to shove the money in my pockets. So I was kind of smart and stupid at the same time. I was slick, but then I kind of made some mistakes as well, and that actually kind of was a pattern, like throughout my career, where I was smart on the one hand, and I was getting away with it for a long time, but then I would make these like little rookie mistakes every now and then that kind of messed me up. So that was like a little foreshadowing of things to come.
Right. Yeah, that's crazy, man, that you were able to call the law enforcement and get information about the job that you had just did. That's pretty crazy. So
yeah, it didn't make the cut of the book, and I was trying to fit a way to get it in there, but I just couldn't find the way it wouldn't move the story forward. But I'll tell you what, you'd be surprised what people tell you if you just act like, that you know what you're doing. Walk in a place like you own the joint, and they'll think you own the joint. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I've always heard that. How long did it take you after that first job to start planning the next one?
So after that first one, next one I did it actually was a couple years later. I ended up knocking over the same bank. And at that point, I already had the mask I would use throughout my career in Israel, which was a high quality silicone mask from this company. This company is now out of business, but they made the most realistic masks in the world. they have other companies now that sell these similar type of masks, but I think this one was the best. They're no longer in business, but I ended up buying a mask of like an old man, a 60-year-old man, bald. So, literally the opposite of how I looked at the time. So, yeah, I was like that blue chick from X-Men, that could shape shit. You know what I mean? So that was like
Right.
my ace in the hole. And the first job I didn't have that. The first job I just had like a baseball hat, Howard Stern wig, and that's it. Second job I already had the mask, so I could walk in. People think that mask is so high quality. Somebody sees it, they just think they see you wearing it. They'll think it's an old man walking down the street. They'll never look twice.
Mm.
So knocked over the second one. Uh, what happened after that one was, I was still young, I was still a kid. I was living at home with my folks. So my mother ended up finding a stash of money, attaché case filled with money in my closet and like, some other tools of the trade. And right away she knew what I was up to. And she was so heartbroken and just, in a panic and just upset. I basically met her halfway. Like I promised her I would never do this in the States. And, she made me promise her, and I meant it. I kept my promise. I met her halfway. I said to myself that I'm not going to do it in the States. I'm going to fly off to greener pastures, and that's kind of how that whole Israel thing got started.
Gotcha. Yeah, before we talk about your time in Israel, you were talking about that high quality mask. You were telling me before that you also had gloves that looked like an old guy. Um, did you
Right,
get those?
right. I
I
no,
mean,
I got those later on. At that point, I didn't even have those yet, so I would have to
okay,
like, yeah, I think I taped up my fingerprints. This time I taped up all 10, not like the first time. So, but I didn't even have the gloves at that point yet. Yeah.
got you. So, you move to Israel. Once you get there, you end up joining the Israeli army. How was that?
Yeah, so I did something called Aliyah, which is the law of return. So anybody who's Jewish can obtain Israeli citizenship very easily. And, it may sound crazy, but I kind of did my homework. Israel's a liberal country when it comes to criminal justice, at least compared to America. And I figured, if I'm going to apply my trade, if I'm going to live this life, if I can't get this out of my head, if I can't get this out of my soul, this is what I have to do. For whatever reason, I'm drawn to this. I'm not going to do it in the States where they're going to give me 100 years and, lock me up with the Aryan Brotherhood and black Muslims and cholos and whoever. I figured I'm going to go, to the homeland, to the promised land, be around my own people. That way, if I do get pinched, I'm at least I can do my time with relative ease, around my own people. And it's, like I said, it's liberal country when it comes to criminal justice. So when I did move there, I ended up joining the army at first because I had to join the army also based on the laws at the time. But I was kind of prolonging the inevitable, so I figured let me see what I can do with this army thing. I can always do the other stuff later. Let me do this first. But unfortunately, I was too much of a hothead to be taking orders, and was too much of a wild kid. I got the boot. They gave me the boot after like. Long story short, I didn't have a memorable army career, so they gave me the boot, and I was kind of, I knew it was gonna happen, so it was sort of like what's that word where you're like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
So uh, later on, uh, this didn't make the cut either. This wasn't in the book, but later on in my case, they accused me of knocking over a bank when I was still in the army, and it's that story's kind of funny. So uh, I had a attaché case, filled with cash, and I got into some trouble in the army at first. So they didn't. I wanted to be in a combat unit, But because I got sent to the brig, to army jail, they didn't allow that at first. They allowed that later, and I still got booted out. But at first, they didn't allow that. They sent me to work logistics at a top secret base, and I was there during the week. But during weekends, I was back. I had leave, and I would live in something called like a hostel for lone soldiers, which is basically in Israel, it's a civilian army. So guys have to do 3 years mandatory service when starting from when they're 18, and girls have to do 2 years. So these kids, they don't make any money doing this. Like, they have to do it. It's obligatory. So people like me, like that came from overseas, they got a little extra money, but they have nowhere to stay because they don't have any families in the country. So a lot of times they stay in these hostels for lone soldiers, like dorm rooms for soldiers. So it's kind of like college with, with micro Tavor rifles and M16s. So I was staying in this hostel in Ramat Gan, which is sort of like a Tel Aviv suburb. And I was going to base during the week and coming back on the weekend. And I had this attaché case filled with money. So bear in mind, everybody around me is broke. Some guys don't have money for cigarettes because they don't get paid for being in the army. They get nothing. So I felt like I hit the lottery. I had money. This was the adrenaline rush I was looking for. And I would go to base. I would lock up the attaché case filled with money in my locker in my room. I would take my duffel bag, go to base for the week, come back on the weekend. And I don't know how many weeks I did this, but I don't think it was that long because when I got back one weekend from base, the locks were clipped in my room. My locker was open. The other lockers were open. So I almost had a heart attack. I started looking through the stuff, and I was asking my roommate, what the hell happened? Like, what the fuck, what happened? And he said we had some new roommates. They were doing drugs, and the military police came in and searched the room for drugs. They had dogs, this and that. So I was looking through my locker frantically, and I found the attaché case. I take it. I go in the bathroom because I can't count the money in front of my freaking roommate. I go in the bathroom. I lock the door. I look through the money. The money's all there. I count it. Everything's there. And somehow, someway, by some miracle, the military police, I guess they were just looking for drugs because they completely missed an attaché case filled with cash. And I don't know what would have happened if they would have found it, but obviously it would have raised a few eyebrows. So from that point on, I would put that money in my duffel bag, my army duffel bag, take it with me to base, and I pretty much would never leave it out of my sight. I would just leave it in my room and hope none of my roommates on base would look through my duffel bag, which they never did. So that's a funny story with that. But basically, after I got booted out, I was kind of right back to where I knew I would be. And the army career was short-lived.
Gotcha. So in the book, you talk about somewhat of a wild relationship that you had with a girl. Did you meet her there in Israel?
Yeah, so I met her. I met her after I got out of the army, and I met her around the time when, so it was like about 9 months after I got 9 months after I got discharged. That's when I met her.
And
so the funny thing with that is she was in a top secret Air Force base, and I could never ask her what she did because it was classified. And we kind of got serious pretty quick, and she wanted to know what I was doing, but I never told her. So I didn't want to lie to her and make something up. I just said, look, I'm doing some things. I can't talk about it. And that's just what it is.
Right.
So she could never ask me about my job. I could never ask her about her job. So it was, I think I have this in the book. If Cupid doesn't have, what was the line from the book? Do you remember? It was like, Cupid has a sense of irony. It was good. It was good. I don't remember it off the top of my head. It was a good line.
I do remember it, but I don't remember how it went. But I was going to ask you, did she have any idea about what you did? But I do remember that. that you mentioned that in the book.
So she did. She knew I was a criminal. Like, I didn't pretend I wasn't, but she didn't know what kind of criminal. So I don't know if she thought I was a burglar at first. She thought I was, maybe dealing drugs, but I kind of straightened her out. I said, look, I hate drugs. I would never do that. And I don't know what she thought afterwards, but I kind of got her used to not asking questions. She became like a gun mole, like a mob wife or something. Like, she wouldn't ask questions. I just tell her, look, I gotta go. She'd be like, work, work stuff. I say, yeah, and she wouldn't ask a thing. So, yeah, she was basically, she was kind of, she was with the program. She didn't know what I was doing, but she wasn't asking questions.
Yeah, got you. So you're out of the military. You're in Israel. In the book, you talk about a jewelry store heist. Can you talk about how you planned that? What made you decide to go from banks to a jewelry store, and how did that go down?
Yeah, so I remember I was riding the bus and I was passing through. So in Israel, there's like a high-end shopping district called Kikar Hamedina, and it's sort of like the equivalent of what we have in New York, Madison Avenue or something, right? So um, Fifth Avenue, wherever they have the high-end shops that we can't afford, but it's sort of the equivalent of that. And I remember I was on the bus and I saw this jewelry store, and it was kind of like I just really liked the angles. Everything, there was an alley nearby where I could park the getaway car. The jewelry store had like curtains in the window, so you couldn't really see inside. It was on this main like high end uh, little boulevard, but it's sort of not even a boulevard. It's like a circle. It's like a big traffic circle, and you have these high end shops all around the traffic circle. But this one was like right around the corner from the traffic circle, so it was like right out of the way of like the main area. So I just liked the angles, and I started watching it. I would go there, like I'd sit in this, not far from it, have a coffee, and just like count how many cop cars would pass by, during the day or whatever. And it wasn't a lot, so I was like, all right, this is good. There's not a lot of cops around the area, and I like the angle, so I figured, you know what, let me do this. I walked in one day just to scope it out, no mask, nothing, just walked in, and the jewels were priced, ridiculously high. So I thought I was gonna be chilling on an island if I get a few of these baubles, So decided to do it. Had when I did it, I had the mask, I had the old man gloves at that point as well. Get buzzed into the store. There's like a woman who's like, the only woman there who's kind of like selling, I guess she's not the cashier. She's everything. She's the cashier. She opens the jewel, the cases, everything. So I walk in. I asked her, I wanted to see something. She opens one of the glass cases, and I always carried a fake gun when I did this. I never carried a real gun because number one, you don't need it. If the gun looks real, that's enough. I wasn't there to hurt anybody. I'm not going to get into a shootout with any cops, something like that. It's not the movies, the same heat. So you don't need a real gun. If you do get pinched, when I did end up getting pinched, it actually helped me that I never carried a real gun because that showed the judge that I wasn't out to hurt nobody, and I actually got a lesser sentence because of that. But I never carried a real gun, and I pulled a fake gun out, and I tell her to open the rest of the glass containers. So as soon as I pull it out, she gets into a panic, flips out, and I tell her nothing's gonna happen, not gonna hurt you, just open the containers. But she was just in a panic, wouldn't listen at all, and literally just ran out of the store. So ran out of the store. There was another guy in the back who I didn't even know about because I never saw him when I would scope the place. He was in the back room. And I guess he pressed the alarm button because the alarm started to go off. She ran out. The door locked behind her. I heard the guy in the back, yelling, red guy, which means wait, wait in Hebrew, something like that. And so what I did was I got the one glass container she opened. I emptied that one out, and I tried to find the clicker. She had this little clicker that she used to bust the door open. I couldn't find it. So now at this point, the alarm's going. People are gathering outside trying to peek inside past the curtains to see what's going on. So I felt like a monkey in a cage. So I started to muscle the door open. And, I thought I was going to get pinched. I thought this was it. But eventually I muscled the door open, because I couldn't find the clicker. So I literally just like yanked it open and ran out of there like my freaking ass was on fire. I had the getaway car in an alley, around the corner, get in, drive off, got away clean, ended up flying back to the States later on, fenced Jules on 47th Street. And I got it was a decent score, but, I always say this, the real criminals are the guys who were selling that jewelry 10 times more than it was actually worth. So,
Right.
and
Yeah.
also, fun fact, after I got pinched, and the cops were interrogating me, I remember them mentioning how much the jewelry store lost, and it was a crazy number. So they inflated the number just to rip off the insurance company, because it wasn't even the number the cops said wasn't even the retail price. So they inflated it even more. I don't blame them, but I'm just saying. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But so yeah, that was the jewelry store. It was a close call, but I got away clean, so I appreciated that for sure.
Yeah. Did you have a difficult time trying to fence the jewelry to get cash?
So what I did was I walked around 47th Street, and I was just I got a good idea of how much it costs, because they're gonna try to rip you off at first, but you got to keep going, and after you walk around there all day, you get a good idea of the price. So I knew really what it was worth. I put in the work, figured out what it was really worth. And I found a guy over there who wouldn't ask questions, didn't ask for ID. Uh, you know, sold him the stuff, and then what he did with it, I don't know. Yeah, so
Did you always do these jobs by yourself, or did you ever have an accomplice, or did you always
uh,
work alone?
always alone, always my whole life. Never trusted anybody. I figured I'm not gonna rat myself out, right? But you work with somebody, you better trust this guy like he's your brother, So because one wrong slip of the tongue, it's over. So uh,
Yeah.
yeah, you got to find somebody you can trust with your life, who's cut from the same cloth and is willing to take the same risks. So uh, you know, I was always working alone, never trusted anybody. Uh, you know, I think that, listen, when you count on yourself, you don't got to worry about. There's enough shit to worry about. You don't have to worry about other people. You
Yeah.
don't have to worry about pillow talk, somebody telling his girlfriend, bragging. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I was just curious about that. You talked about using a fake gun. I would be worried, that someone would pull a real gun on me. That actually happened to you. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So this also didn't make the cut in the book, but so this was one of the scores was basically when I got pinched later, it was on the indictment. They ended up taking it off the indictment as part of the plea deal, but it was an attempted bank job in North Tel Aviv where I walk in and tell the teller to hand over the money, and she wasn't listening. So I pulled a fake piece out to let her know I'm serious. And, I scoped the bank out. I didn't see any security, nothing. And then all of a sudden, I hear somebody yelling, freeze, drop the gun, something like that from the other side of the bank. I turn around, there's a guy pointing a gun at me. So I drop the gun and I tell him, I dropped the fake gun, I should say. And I tell him, don't shoot. I'm unarmed. And boom, I dashed out of there. I was hoping not to get shot in the back, and I didn't, luckily. I got away clean, no money, but I got away with my life, so that was good. And so this was before the jewelry store, and this is right around when I met my girl. And I was worried they were going to get prints off the fake gun because I never expected to lose it, so I wasn't really worried about prints. So after that, when I flew back to the States, and I was paranoid about coming back to Israel because I was thinking, what if they? Because when you join the army, they take your prints. So I was thinking maybe they'll match the prints, this and that. But a few months later, I flew back. I couldn't help it. I was like a moth to a flame. My girlfriend was there. That's where the money was. That's where the action was. And I was like, you know what? I'll risk it. They pinch me. They pinch me. So I fly in, walk through the airport thinking, am I going to get stopped, locked up, questioned? No, nothing. So nothing happened, and I went about business as usual. Ended up taking down that jewelry store that I just told you about.
Right.
And then when I ended up getting locked up, my lawyers ended up telling me that they did not recover any prints from that fake gun that I dropped. So, but yeah, I almost got shot. I was lucky I didn't get shot in the back, but I made it out of there. So a life to tell the tale.
Gotcha. Now, a minute ago, you were talking about, having stolen plates on the car. I mean, would you steal plates every time you were doing a job?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but so what I would do, I think I would steal plates. A few times I had to I switched. I stole different plates, but I would, I had like a hiding place where I would stash this stuff.
Yeah. Are these stolen cars too, or
No,
just?
no. So I would rent a car. I would
Okay.
rent a car, but I would switch the legit tags with the stolen tags. So if they see the plates, it doesn't matter. They can't match it to anything, and that was kind of my MO. And I would also, I was so OCD about it that I would even put black tape over the VIN number just in case there was some freaking traffic camera that could zoom into the VIN number, which is unlikely, but you never know. So I would even do that when I was, taking the scores down. But so yeah, I would rent a car, which I would put on the stolen tags. And when people actually during those years, when people asked me what I did for a living, I would always say I'm in the rental car business. That was always my thing. So I rented cars and I went about my business. But no stolen cars, man. Stolen cars, that's it's a hassle. That's too complicated.
Gotcha. Now, in the book, you talk about a nightmare that you had about losing the money that you had stole. When you're doing these robberies, how are you keeping yourself away from the paranoia?
Yeah, so I'm very good at compartmentalizing. I'd be able to not think about the score until I was literally right about to do it. And I could, go about my normal day, and then right before I have to do it, then I start getting the butterflies, and then I start getting nervous. Um, and I guess I repressed all that fear of getting caught, fear of getting killed. I must have repressed it because right after that jewelry store, right after the jewelry store heist, I remember I was in my apartment in Ramat Gan, Tel Aviv suburb. I was sleeping. My girlfriend was sleeping next to me, and I woke up in a cold sweat, screaming like a lunatic. Woke her up. Obviously, she was just flipping out. Like, what's the matter? What happened? And I had this dream that there was like somebody in the apartment looking for the jewels that I had stolen. Some like shadowy figure, and I just that's it's something that stood out because it was just so clear that this is like that repressed fear coming out in my dreams. So I didn't feel it when I was going about my life day to day, but it was like buried deep down, and that's when it came out. Um, so it was just one of those things I never forgot. That one dream. It sounds like it wasn't much, but you have to be there.
Yeah. Gotcha. Now, you talk about going back and forth from Israel to the United States. How often were you going back and forth, and was it to visit family?
Yeah, so I fly into Israel for it would vary, 6 weeks, 2 months. Fly back to the States. Uh, I was trying to get out of the life too. I was trying to looking at ways to do something legit that I could really love doing and not do this. But I was kind of I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. But you know I, I was half-assed in it with trying to get out. I was really just like this was my crutch. As soon as I needed money, as soon as anything, I was back to doing this. This was like my whole identity at the time. Like this is what I do. This is who I am. So um, yeah, I was back and forth for a bit, and I ended up after the jewelry store heist, flew back to the States. Ended up flying back to Israel a few months after. And I was living with my girlfriend in a city called Haifa, which is 1 hour north of Tel Aviv. Uh, and we were living. She was doing like a classified Army Air Force course somewhere over there. I ended up living with her there. I rented an apartment for us. And when I was there, I noticed a cash exchange store right around the corner, pretty much from where we were living, that was just too good to pass up because most cash exchange stores are all over the place in Israel because we have so many people from all over the world that they're everywhere. You can exchange notes from shekels to dollars to euros to whatever. So
Gotcha.
they're everywhere, but they usually have bulletproof glass going all the way up to the ceiling, and they're not ideal targets. But this one, I saw and I stumbled across it. It was too good to be true. The bulletproof glass went up halfway, so you could literally jump over it. It didn't go up to the ceiling. It had like a little lobby area where you walk in. There's like a little lobby. You can literally lock the front door behind you. You get buzzed into the main part of the store, and you literally, if you need to hop over the glass barrier, you just hop over. So it's on a relatively quiet street. It was perfect. So I didn't do it. I didn't hit it when we were living there, but uh, I ended up flying back to New York after we lived there for a month, and then a few months later, I flew back, and I ended up taking it down. So I bought a clothes sign from a hardware store, and I my plan was to put it by the front door so that if anybody wanted to come in when I'm in there, they would see the close sign. Nobody wanted to come in. Plus, I would lock the front door, so I wouldn't have a line of customers waiting for the cash exchange to open. There'd be nobody there. No would-be heroes, nothing. So, I walk into the lobby. There's a guy inside. I wait for him to finish his business. He leaves, says good day to me. Remember, I'm wearing the whole getup, the mask, the gloves. He thinks I'm just some old man. He walks out. I put the close sign by the front door, and these two housewives are coming in. They're like, "Oh, you guys are closed?" I tell them, "Yeah, we'll be open in 1 hour. Come back later." They leave. I lock the front door from the inside, get buzzed in, and my plan was I'm gonna pull the fake piece out so I don't have to jump over the glass barrier. So I figured why do the extra work. So
Right.
pull the fake piece out, and the woman behind the counter, I tell her, "Look, just open the door. I'm just here for the money." But she kind of was like a deer in the headlights, froze up, and started inching towards the counter where I knew there was an alarm button. So I was just kind of like, don't do it, don't do it. But she pressed the alarm. Alarm starts going off. So plan B, I hop over the counter, empty the till. She's flipping out, but I'm not paying any attention to her. I empty the till, hop back over, run out, grab the close sign that was outside, go into the getaway car, drive a few blocks away where there was a garage that I discovered when I was living there that was empty, courtesy of the weekday afternoon. Everybody was at work. Drive into this garage, uh, switch the plates, change clothes, take the mask off, everything. Leave the car parked on the street in a legal parking spot. The car's clean as a whistle. I put everything, the money, the plates, the fake gun, the mask, the gloves, everything. I put it in this big duffel bag. So I call a cab. I wait a little bit, like 7 minutes for the cab to come. At this point, there are cops driving around the area. Some cop cars are driving by. They give me a once over, but I don't match the description. The cab comes. I get in, and he takes. I switched cabs like 3 times before going back to Tel Aviv because I didn't want it to be obvious. I thought it would raise eyebrows if I get a cab to take me an hour all the way to Tel Aviv from Haifa. So end up making it back to Tel Aviv, got away clean. It was a great score money wise. Had the money out, in my apartment. But I honestly, my guilty conscience was weighing on me because this woman was so freaking scared that I couldn't even enjoy the fact that I'd made off with all this money. So had to go back to Haifa to get the rental car, drive it back to Tel Aviv so I could return it the next day. Because I was paranoid about driving it back all that way after the score because I figured if somebody got a look at it, So waited till it, was later on in the day. In the evening, drove it back. Returned it. Score went off without a hitch, and had that guilty conscience weighing on me. But the drive back it was like therapy for me. The drive back at night, by the Mediterranean, driving into Tel Aviv, you see the city lights. It was like therapy. So I felt like Neil McCauley on the freeway in Heat right before Pacino pulls him over and they go for that cup of coffee. So I kind of felt like that.
Gotcha. Now you talked about having a guilty conscience because of this woman's reaction. She was scared to death. You pulled off another cash exchange robbery to where, and the guy that was there, he freaked out as well, but you didn't feel that guilty about it. Can you talk about that and why that is?
Yes, this was the last score I pulled before I got locked up. This was another cash exchange that I ran across in a city called Cologne, which is a city south of Tel Aviv. And this one, basically, it was like you walk in, to the right is the till with the bulletproof glass going all the way up to the ceiling. But then if you keep going, there's like a big lobby, like not a lobby, like an office space. And so I actually have the surveillance footage of this heist. So hopefully when this interview is playing, you'll be playing that footage so people can see what I'm talking about. But there's like an office space. So it was like a cash exchange, and I think people could apply for loans over there as well. So I started watching the place because I saw the setup was really good. And in the mornings, the guy that would open the place up, he would open it up and then he would just sit in this office space. And basically I knew I could come in, pull the fake gun out, tell him to open the door to where the till was, where I knew the safe was, and have him open the safe. So he was vulnerable. He was just sitting out there with the door open. He wasn't behind the bulletproof glass, and I noticed that little chink in the armor. And I knew I would watch the place in the mornings, and I had like, I think, half an hour until his secretary arrived or something like that. So I knew I had that half an hour window when this guy was alone. And that would make things easier, less people to worry about. So the reason I didn't really feel bad about this was, I would watch the place, and this guy was this little short, chubby, little cocky bastard who would pull up in like a white sports car. You could hear the engine from a mile away. He kind of had this flashy watch. He would swagger over to the place, open it up, and I don't know, he rubbed me the wrong way because I saw right through him. I knew he wasn't gonna be so cocky when shit hit the fan, and I just didn't like his attitude. If somebody's cocky, they got to be cocky at all times. Keep that same energy, as the kids say these days.
Yeah.
So don't just be like that when things are easy and good. You know what I mean? So for some reason, he rubbed me the wrong way, and I remember thinking, like, let's see how cocky you'll be when this goes down. So, when I ended up pulling off the score, so this guy flipped out. He was worse than anything I'd ever come across before. He was just hyperventilating, having a freaking panic attack. You know, I told him to open the safe, and he couldn't get it open. He was in such a panic he couldn't get the safe open. But eventually he got it open. He climbed onto the desk, onto the table for some reason. I didn't tell him to do that. He just did that. I emptied the safe out, get the money, kind of lightly jog out of the place, get in the getaway car, drive off. Smoothest job I ever pulled, and it made me overconfident. I think it's part of the reason I ended up getting pinched a couple months later because uh, I just after that one I got way too full of myself. So pride comes before a fall. That's exactly what happened.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty crazy, man. I meant to ask you a minute ago. You did a job where the teller slipped a die pack into the money and exploded on you. Does that ruin the whole score?
Oh yes, that was the second to last job I pulled. That was before the cash exchange, the one that I just told you about. So yeah, that one. So you're supposed to ruffle through the money, and you're supposed to like bend it because when it's the money's money is money. So when you bend it, it bends. But when the stack of money when you're doing a bank, when it's too thick, when it's too stiff, then you're supposed to toss it back over the counter because that's most likely it's got a die pack inside. So when I was doing this one, the teller slipped one past the goalie. First time for everything, and I I didn't realize that she did it. Obviously, I'm kind of lightly jogging to the getaway car that was like around the corner. All of a sudden, I hear a pop, and red smoke starts billowing out of the attaché case. I open the car door, I get in, I flip the attaché case so the smoke is going down. Like I put the hole facing downwards so it doesn't fill the car
So
up with smoke.
it blew
Yeah,
a hole right out the side of it.
yeah, it blew a hole right out the side of the attaché case.
Damn.
Yeah, so I drive off nice and slow, nice and easy, not to attract attention. Take the mask off, take the gloves off, and then I drive a few blocks away. I park by a sewer grate. I look through the money. I put on rubber gloves. I look through the money. I find the the die pack, and for all I knew, it doubled as a GPS device. So I was like, let me get rid of this right now. I
Yeah.
walk out of the car, throw it in a sewer grate, walk back to the car. I kept expecting SWAT teams to jump out from behind every corner, but nothing happened. I get back in the car, drive back to Tel Aviv, everything, got back home smooth, got away clean, but most of the money was covered in red paint. So, I had to try to clean it. So I got acetone, which I read you could clean it with acetone. That was a losing battle. And some of the bills were less damaged than others. Some of them were lightly stained, but they were all stained. So I took the ones that were lightly stained, and I would take taxi rides all around Tel Aviv, and I would get in a taxi. I'd make small talk with the driver. I'd tell him I was a taxi driver from Canada. I'd make friends with him, and as I'm leaving, I'd give him the bill. And because I'd make friends with them, they'd feel comfortable. And they would ask me, like, what's up with this red stain, this and that. And I'd be like, my daughter was playing with crayons, markers. And most of the time they bought it because I was kind of like charming them, and they would give me the change. So that's how I would clean the money. And then one of these taxi rides, I'm on Ben Yehuda Street in Tel Aviv, which is close to the beach. And I see a cash exchange ATM machine. So you can literally insert the money and it inserts not inserts. You insert the money and it spits out. So you insert shekels, it'll spit out dollars or whatever.
Mm.
And I didn't even know they had these machines. As soon as I saw it, I knew I wasted everything I'd done before was a waste of time. So I just literally exchanged the rest of the money. The money that was so damaged that the machine wouldn't take it, I just burned it in my bathroom sink, and that kept me busy for a while. So it actually spiced up the job, because sometimes you do this. Sometimes this stuff it almost gets old. Like it's almost like you take down scores long enough and it becomes just like another day in the office.
Right. With all the robberies that you carried out, what was the most that you ever made on a score?
Well, I'll leave that for people to find out if they read the book. But I was
Okay,
doing all right, man. I wasn't a millionaire or nothing like that. I wasn't gonna retire off it, but I was doing all right. I wasn't
gotcha.
working. This is the only way I made a living. I was kind of, you know, doing. I was either doing a score, I was scoping scores out, or I was just, So uh, I wasn't gonna retire off it. But for a kid in his like at that time, I was what, mid 20s. I was doing all right. I was making a living, paying my rent.
Gotcha. Yeah. Now, at one point in the book, you talk about possibly joining the fire department. Were there times, throughout your career doing these robberies that you wanted to get a legit job?
Yeah, so I was, like I said before, I was flying back to the States, trying to get out. Uh, you know, one foot in, one foot out, but uh, I always had that crutch to fall back on. I always had, the fact that I could fly back to Israel, take a score, and I was, like I said, it was my identity. So I did end up. I was going for a fire department. I was for some reason I flew out to LA. I wanted to live somewhere with warm weather. I didn't want to live in New York, so I flew to LA. I tried to get into the fire department there, but I ended up missing. I think I failed by like 1 point. So you know, 1 point may as well have been 100 points. So
Yeah.
that didn't work out. But I'll tell you what, I don't know how that would have went because I'm not so good at taking orders. So I don't think that would have went any different than the army. Put me in anything with structure and orders and hierarchy. I don't do so good. Well, actually, except when I was in the joint, because we'll get to that later. But
Yeah.
ironically, maybe it's because I was around people like myself. But yeah, man. So that whole going straight thing at that time, it didn't work out. Uh, better late than never. I went straight. Now now I'm living a law-abiding life. So better late than never.
Right. Now, we spoke earlier and talked about holding off on this story and let people read it in the book. But eventually you do get caught. What were you charged with and ultimately convicted of?
Yeah. So I was when I got pinched. I was accused of seven jobs over the course of the alleged 3 years. Um, and they ended up dropping two of those accusations. I was indicted for five, uh, and then I got some good lawyers, and they ended up getting me a good deal where uh, they dropped another charge, and I ended up pleading to four. So I ended up pleading to two cash exchange stores, that bank where the teller slipped me the dime pack, and the jewelry store. So I ended up pleading guilty to 4 counts. I got so basically I was looking at first before the plea deal. The prosecutor was talking 12 years. She was talking real talk. So eventually she calmed down. And after I took the plea deal, I was looking at a minimum of 4 years, a maximum of 8 years. The judge ended up splitting it down the middle. I got 5 years, 8 months. Which really, uh, uh, I'm grateful for what I got because it's all things considered, it's nothing because in the states they would have buried me under the jail for what I was doing in Israel. So
Right.
I kind of knew what I was doing when I moved there. I knew it was a liberal criminal justice system, and I ended up getting 5 years, 8 months. Um, and I also want to mention, I want to before we go further, I want to mention that I love Israel to death. I'm a patriot. I love my country, and this wasn't anything like. It may sound crazy coming from a guy who was a career criminal, but even back then, I loved Israel. It was my mentality was the money's insured. I'm not taking from innocent people. The money's all insured by the government or by insurance companies or whatever, and I'm not hurting anybody. Um, that was my mentality when I was doing it. So, uh, you know, I love Israel. I love my country, and I just want to say that I don't want people to get the wrong idea about this. So
Right.
yeah, but so yeah, I ended up getting locked up, and when I was in Tel Aviv's county jail, which is it's called Abu Kabir. I first got locked up. I'm sitting in my cell and I'm trying to get my thoughts organized, trying to come to terms with what just happened. And this guy comes to the cell, another prisoner, prison tats, heavy set guy, and he calls me over to the cell. He says, "Hey, you speak Russian? Are you Russian?" And right away, I kind of had an inkling. I knew who this was because I had heard about this prisoner fraternity in the Israeli prison system, this Russian-speaking prisoner fraternity in the Israeli prison system. Right? Obviously, never come across it before, and here I was face to face with it. Now, before I kind of get into that, so people understand, there's basically a criminal subculture in Russia, Russian-speaking countries within the Russian-speaking community called the Thieves' Code. And it's something that all Russian-speaking people know about the way, in America, everybody knows about, Cosa Nostra, Hell's Angels, even if they have nothing to do with it. So the same thing with this. Something I heard about, knew about, but never had anything to do with it. And what it is, it's a subculture where if you ever seen those movies, those documentaries of the guys with those stars on the shoulders and all that, the thieves in law,
Yeah.
it's yeah. So it goes back to 100 years, if not longer, to Russian Siberian gulags, prison camps, where people that live by this thieves code, they're not allowed to work, they're only allowed to make money through whether it's picking pockets, cracking safes, stick ups to a lesser extent, whatever the case may be. They kind of run the prisons when they get locked up. They're like the dons. So there's so many Russian-speaking people in Israel. So I think there's 2 million of them, or something like that. So of a country that of like 9 million, 9 or 10 million people. So basically, the prison system in Israel is filled with this subculture. It basically immigrated from Russia, from these Russian-speaking countries to Israel. So this guy, he was the shot caller of the jail, of the jailhouse. And he asked me, if I speak Russian. I told him I do. Told him I was born there but raised in America. He asked me what I'm being accused of. My lawyer, obviously, my lawyers told me don't tell nobody about your case. I told him, look, I don't want to talk about my case. He kind of gave me a look. He said, I got to know who, what kind of people are locked up over here. So I said, what the hell? I said, look, I'm falsely accused of multiple robberies. He said, all right. And he calls over the guard, tells him to open the cell. The guard opens it, escorts me out, puts me in the adjacent cell. But all the prisoners there, all Russian speaking guys, everybody's very respectful. They all say hello. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This guy literally told the guard what to do. Like I felt I just walked onto a movie set. And so I'm in the cell. The shot caller, he walks off. He's locked up in another part of the wing, and everybody's cracking jokes, telling stories, and I really wanted to just kind of be alone with my thoughts, but I couldn't think straight. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't think straight. So before long, I was just cracking jokes, telling stories. Everybody, it sounds crazy, but we were actually having a good time, laughing and just talking about all kinds of nonsense. Really, like I never talked about my case, but we would just tell all kinds of random stories and just it sounds crazy. I know it sounds nuts to people, but it was actually kind of a good time, believe it or not. And I was basically thrust into this sort of prison fraternity, this quasi prison gang for the duration of my bid. I had to learn the ins and outs, learn the ropes as I went along, and that's what I did. There was a hierarchy. There was a shot caller for the cell block. There was a shot caller for the whole prison who outranked them. There was two thieves in law on the street who kind of had the last word, who ran all the prisons in Israel. And also, I want to preface this by saying this is common knowledge in the street. In prison, I'm not giving away state secrets. And this is, everybody knows this. So, yeah, man, it was. I learned as I went. It was a lot of rules. We weren't allowed to raise our hands to each other. If there was any dispute, any misunderstanding, we had to have a sit down with the shot caller. He would resolve the dispute. The only time we were allowed to raise our hands to each other was, obviously self-defense, or if somebody insulted us directly, if somebody cursed at us. So we were never allowed to curse at each other because that's a green light right there. You curse at somebody, boom, like you're in the wrong. So a lot of nuances to this. And, I just kind of learned as I went. I became friends with a few shot callers over the years. They taught me the ins and outs. And a lot of it, because we weren't allowed to raise our hands to each other, a lot of it becomes wordplay. So, sort of like guys try to catch you slipping with your, they try to set traps for you wordplay wise. So it's almost becomes a war of words. They try to like set traps for you. So if you say the wrong thing, maybe they get all of a sudden you put yourself in a position where they're allowed to raise their hands to you, or you put yourself in a position where you'll lose the sit down. So it's almost like like in court, if a lawyer is really slick, he can get you off even if you're guilty. Same thing over there. If a guy's really good with his words, he can kind of justify a lot of things even if he's in the wrong. So I ended up being pretty slick with the wordplay myself after a bit. I had to adapt, so that's kind of how it was in the joint, man. It was three groups. So the Russians, I was clicked up with the Russians. There were the Israelis, which, depends on the cell block you're in. Sometimes it's just Israelis that are like, not mob guys or anything, but just Israelis, they stick together. Sometimes you'll have Israeli crime families that run cell blocks. Then you have the Arabs, that's the third group. And sometimes, again, you have Arabs just sticking together. Sometimes you have Arab crime families. You also have Arabs, they're not just one group, because you have the Arabs from the south of the country, which are the Bedouin Arabs. And they're split up into families, clans, so they're kind of split up. Then you have Arabs from the center of the country, and they have their own crime families, so they're split up. Then you have Arabs from the north. You have Arabs from Jerusalem, which none of the other Arabs like because they're not even really criminals. They're more like in there for random nonsense. And they're always, they kind of have a bad reputation for snitching. Not all of them are snitches, but they have a bad reputation for snitching and this and that. So even the other Arabs didn't like them. So, there are 2 million Israeli Arabs in Israel. Most of them Muslims, full citizenship, full rights. So you have these three groups in the Israeli prison system. No terrorists. Terrorists are housed separately, but they're not housed with regular prisoners. So, I could have wrote a whole book about prison, but most of that prison stuff didn't really make the cut. Some of the stuff was in the book, but a lot of it didn't make the cut. But time flew by, man. I stayed busy. I wrote. I read a lot. Played chess. Worked out. So I stayed busy, kept my mind active.
Right. Yeah. That thieves code that you're talking about, it sounds like it's a lot of similarities, between the mafia, to the mafia. I mean, the structure and that sort of thing. But you just mentioned that you did a lot of reading. At what part did you decide to start writing your book?
So right when I got locked up, my girlfriend at the time, she brought me this book I had lying around my apartment, Jackrabbit Parole by Stephen Reed. Stephen Reed was a member of the Stopwatch gang, legendary crew of bank robbers. Stephen Reed is a legendary bank robber in his own right. And I've always loved reading ever since I was a kid. And I had this book lying around the apartment, never got around to reading it. So, I get locked up, she brings it to me. And, I start reading it and I'm just so inspired and blown away by it. It was such an amazing book that I was just inspired to write. And I tried to emulate his writing style. I kind of used his book as a blueprint for the story structure of my book. So my book is with, my original story, but I used his story structure kind of format to structure my book. And what he did was he kind of wrote a book based on his life, but he wrote it in the form of a novel. So He changed their names around. He changed some things around. That's what I did. So I used, real events, but I changed the names around. I wrote it in the form of a novel, so that's really what inspired me to write. And so for most of my bid, I was writing. And when I got out, I started editing the book, and eventually I released it. So, here I am trying to get it out there, get people to give it a shot, crack it open. I know you said you liked it, so that was music to my ears, man.
Yeah, I did enjoy the book. I thought it was really good. Once you're released from prison, was there ever a point where you got the urge to go back to your former way of life, to bank robberies?
Yeah, so I got parole after 4 years and 4 months. I got paroled. I got released. I had an ankle monitor, house arrest at night. During the day, I had a parole approved job. I was working in some factory. And basically, I never actually intended on going straight. So I didn't intend on doing the same things, obviously. But, I made connections when I was locked up, and I was thinking, all right, I'm on parole. I'm going to work this, I'm going to have to work this job. I have all these stipulations. Once I'm off parole, I'm going to make some moves. I know people now, we'll see what happens. But um, what ended up happening was while I was on parole, my mother flew in to see me for the weekend. She could only stay for 2 days. And I remember looking into her eyes, and I just saw all the pain I had caused her. And, I realized all the pain I had caused her, my father. In that moment, I realized how much pain I caused my family. And once I just saw that look in her eyes, I looked into her eyes. In that moment, I knew I was done. Like I told myself, I'm done. I'm not putting my family through this again. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to go straight. And that's what I did. So, never thought it would happen, but here I am. So, life is full of crazy circles.
Right. Yeah, man, it's an incredible story. One last question before we wrap up. I'm just curious if you could go back, and pursue a legit career like the fire department. Would you do that, or would you stick to the path that that you went down and became a bank robber?
No, I wouldn't change anything, man. What could have happened did, so I don't really believe in that whole what if thing. You can do that till the cows come home. So,
Gotcha. Yeah.
it led me to, first off, it was, it was a lot. There were some dark moments, yeah, but a lot of it was a good time. The adrenaline rush, the thrill, and whatever dark moments came of it, it led me to a good place eventually. Actually, ironically, I became closer to my family after that stint in prison and after I changed my life. And so I wouldn't change a thing, man. Wouldn't change a thing.
Gotcha. Well, man, where can people go to get a copy of your book?
Yeah, so the paperback is available on Amazon. The ebook is also on Amazon, and it's on Kobo, Barnes and Noble, Google Books. So hope people check it out. Hope they enjoy it. Worked hard on it, and like I said, I know you liked it. So throw me a good review up there, Jesse. Do,
Yeah.
do the Lord's work, man. You know what I mean? Do me a solid. But
I
I hope people check it out.
All right, man. Mike Mazursky, I appreciate you coming on the channel, man, and talking with me. I've enjoyed, talking about your story. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me on, brother. I really do. It means a lot.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. I appreciate you watching this video. Be sure to get a copy of his book, Once Upon a Time in Tel Aviv, A Bank Robber Story. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and keep following American Made. I appreciate it.
From Brooklyn to Tel Aviv, cash in the breeze. Chasing dreams, dirty hands, no reprieve. Paper cuts, sting, blood on the